Hello, I do believe we're on air, and once again, welcome to another live stream from the only channel you need to not only survive the current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And I'm going to give Ala Toledo a call and get him online so he can tell me what to do. Hey.
I'm here.
Yeah, that worked out good. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on TV right now, I think.
Cool.
And as always, when we start these live streams, just so everybody can get their place, get in position, I'm going to go ahead and read another chapter out of my new book, and this will be chapter 6. Let's see, I got to get this thingamajig turned on so I can see what's going on here. Okay, there I am. I'm looking at myself on the camera now. Okay. Chapter 6. The wicked have no excuse. God's invisible qualities can be understood by studying His visible creation. And that's from Romans chapter 1 and verse 20. Since Satan, the god of civilization, has always been a god of punishment and reward, that concept is the basis of every religion that exists. Since most Western religions claimed to be based on the Bible, most people feel that the God of the Bible is a God of punishment and reward as well. The religious leaders of the empire have had thousands of years to carefully craft their propaganda campaigns to make this appear to be the case. Most people, if asked, would express the belief that the Bible is a rule book for how to get to heaven, even though there is no possible way that someone reading the Bible with an open mind could ever come to such a conclusion. If someone who had never been exposed to the lies of religion were to pick up a Bible and read it from cover to cover with an open mind, they would be able to see the Bible for what it actually is, a written history of the war between God's kingdom and Satan's empire. Genesis chapter 3 records the first event in this war. In this account, God had created human beings after putting in place everything that mankind could ever possibly need or desire. One of those needs, which was instilled into man at his creation, was natural law, the thing that we today call human instinct. It shouldn't surprise us that God would give mankind such a gift, because prior to creating man, God created all of the other living things that we share this planet with, and instilled instinctive behaviors into each and every one of them. It is more than obvious that everything alive has been created in such a way as to make the preservation and perpetuation of life an important part of the instinctive law that exists in every living thing. Birds build nests. Squirrels bury nuts, and beavers build dams. None of this is learned behavior. Everything alive does such things regardless of whether or not they have ever witnessed them being done by other members of their species. At creation, all birds, fish, and land animals instinctively understood what was food and what was not. Nothing alive was flawed in any way. All of the activities of every living thing would benefit creation, and no living thing would cause harm. Obviously, the Bible did not record every single thing that a human would do as part of its own instinctive behavior, but God did make a point of recording some of the basics. At Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28, we are told that mankind was commanded to reproduce offspring. It should be obvious that this command was not verbal, but instinctive. Even in our day, people reproduce without being ordered to do so. Many will engage in sex without having ever witnessed others engaging in sex. At Genesis chapter 1 and verse 29, God tells man what he can eat, and even explains at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 30 what the other creatures may eat. All vegetation is given to man, but only the parts that will do no harm. In other words, mankind was given permission to consume the leaves and fruit of trees, but never given permission to consume any of the trees themselves or any of the other living beings that shared his world. It was not until thousands of years later that God would grant permission to do so to Noah and his family, possibly after most of humanity's natural food had been wiped out. Genesis chapter 9 and verse 3 clearly states, I now give you permission to eat meat, just as I gave you permission to eat vegetation. You may now eat everything. But before granting his permission to do so, God warned Noah at Genesis chapter 9 and verse 2 that all of the animals would be in fear of man. In the beginning, this was not the case. That's it. That's this week's chapter.
Okay, well, to start off, we have hellos. It seems like Don Jones is the first one in, but he might be having some problems at the moment with his audio. Next up is Sleepy Girl 85, says, hey, everyone. Simple Sister Living says, hi, Sustenance and Ala Toledo. Chester Richardson says, hello, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Caesar Olive says, bless you all. Dale Rockwell says, hey, y'all. Vince Tran says, hi, it's me. What's your name? Let's see.
Henry. No, boo-boo. Gotta get down.
Uncle Nesta is here, and you can guess what he says, right?
Yeah, let's from now on just it's understood.
Yep. He says puff puff as usual. Looks like a Marshmallow is here as well. She says, or they say, hi everyone. And it looks like the first question on the agenda for tonight comes from Simple Sister Living, but I agree with her. We want to hear more about the end times timeline and what is coming, and we won't take no for an answer.
Here's the thing about that, and this is a very, very important point that I think is probably good for me to reiterate from time to time. It's kind of like, when I talk about the theme of the Bible it's not a rule book for how to get to heaven. It's simply a recorded history of the war between God's kingdom and Satan's empire. That's an important thing that we need to understand. When I put up that video about September 23rd end times prophecies and how they were not going to play out and how that was absolutely not the sign of anything, got a lot of people that came on with the simple concept that no man knows the day or hour. And that was true in Jesus' day, and it's true right now as well. Now, I made a video a while back where I talked about young earth and the end of the world. And in that, I explained that, if you go by the cycles of time that are mentioned in the Bible, we can get this down to a pretty small little window. And that window would have been, well, I hate to even say because I've got it in a video somewhere, but say from like the end of the world had to happen sometime between 1960 and say 2060. So there's a 100-year area there where the end of the world has to happen. It cannot happen outside of those parameters. And since a lot of that time has already passed, we know we're deep into it. It's eventually something's going to happen. And and the thing about it is, there will come a day when what Jesus says is no longer the case. So when Jesus said, no man knows the day or hour, there will come a day when every man will know the day and the hour. And that should be obvious, because no matter what religion you're in, if the end of the world happens that day, at the very least you know on that day when the end of the world is coming. When I say end of the world, I mean the end of civilization. But another thing that's important is that Jesus gave us a lot of things to look for so that we would know the end of the world was coming. So there's no way that he would say, well, first thing is don't worry about earthquakes because that ain't part of it. Don't worry about wars. That has nothing to do with it. No famines, no pestilence. All that stuff is just happening all the time. You cannot figure out if it's the end of the world because something bad is happening to your neighborhood. You have to look into the sky. There's celestial phenomenon. And so, and a lot of people know that. That's why the September 23rd stuff comes up, because, astrology, the religion that took over after some of the other religions collapsed, keeps track of that stuff. But Jesus talked about signs that would happen. And see, the stuff that happened on the 23rd is not a sign. That's the typical thing. That's like looking at the sun in the morning and go, oh my God, what's happening? You know the sun's going to come up in the morning. We know we know hundreds of years in advance when Jupiter is going to be in Virgo. We know when there's going to be an eclipse. That's not signs. A sign is when science says for a fact there ain't going to be no eclipse tomorrow and the next day there's an eclipse. That's a sign. And in fact, that's the kind of signs that Jesus gave. He said that the sun would become as dark as sackcloth and the moon would become red as blood. That's physically impossible. Cannot happen according to the religion of science. Nothing can make that happen. And yet that's the sign. That's a real sign. So when that happens, we'll know. And I think I don't know if that's the beginning of the last days, end of the last days. I think it's the end. But the very first sign that comes up is the return of the sun and the earth and the moon into conjunction. That means we have a year where it's only 360 days long. And you would think, well, how are we going to figure that out? It's very easy. Right now, our sun and moon are not in conjunction, so what happens is the sun is in the daytime sky, sometimes the moon is up there. It's not supposed to be. According to the Bible, according to all the earliest books of the Bible, the moon was always in the nighttime sky, and the sun was in the daytime sky. And what that means is the moon is going to be full. Because if the moon is here, and the sun's behind you, that sunlight is going to pass right onto the face of the moon. Now, the only time that's not going to be true is when we're in an equinox. I mean, right now it doesn't work that way, but if we were to go back into conjunction every 6 months, there would be a lunar eclipse. In other words, the shadow of the earth would fall upon the moon. And that would happen over the eastern hemisphere in the fall, and then it would happen in the western hemisphere in the spring, because those are both equinoxes. You know, the earth is constantly tilting. When the earth is straight up and down, the northern hemisphere, or rather the western hemisphere would have an equinox, and when it makes its return journey, you know, and the earth is tilting back, well, now the other side of the planet will be in the nighttime sky. So we have 2 a year, but you only have one that's visible to you, you know, unless you travel around the other side of the earth. So the fact is, when we have a full moon and the next day we have a full moon again, that should be a wake-up call to keep an eye out. Because if you have 3 full moons in a row, something's wrong. Because we never have that. You can have 2 that are so close that you can't tell which one is which, but over the course of, 15 days, the moon will go completely black. And so that means that every night the moon has to shrink up a little bit from the shadow. So when that happens, when you see a full moon every night, then that's how you know the end is coming.
Next comment comes from Uncle Nesta. He says he just wants to let you know that there is some cuneiform tablets looted from the Rocky Museum. Somehow they ended up in the Hobby Lobby stores in the New York area, and they were subsequently confiscated. I don't know if that's true or not. But
how many of them do they have? They usually sell in bulk at Hobby Lobby.
Maybe it was just an arts and crafts section.
If I'd have seen them, I'd have probably bought them. I'd have recognized something wasn't right. I don't know. A lot of their stuff looks pretty authentic. You know, if you go in there, they've got like carved rocks and stuff all over the place.
Let's see. Dale Rockwell asks about the moon. You said that the moon will always be in the night sky, and you said that there will be there might have been 3 moons. So it doesn't mean that the 3 moons took turns, or just the moon that is here right now.
Oh, I don't know. It's like in the Bible, there are a lot of ancient Greek and Roman gods mentioned, Sumerian gods, Egyptian gods, and they're mentioned by their names. But as the translators just make these arbitrary decisions of whether or not they're going to transliterate that, or if they're going to try to translate it into its basic meaning, or if they're going to try to translate it into how we understand it today. So it's like the god Saturn, you know, the name Saturn in ancient Roman or Greek mythology may have meant something, you know, Heliel or this halo, and so they may decide to translate it that way, or they may decide to leave it in its original Greek name, whichever that was. It may have they may decide to translate it into something else. And so you get a lot of confusion. But there's a lot about Saturn in the Bible, a lot about Mars, and a lot about Venus. Those names just show up over and over and over again, and coincidentally, on our Earth, all of those names show up in their original cultures. And I'm not just talking about like around the Promised Land, you know, Babylon, Egypt, Phoenicia, Greece. Those areas obviously have a lot of references to that. But you can go to like Chichen Itza, you know, down in, where's that, Central America, or go to China, and it's the same thing. They have these series of 7 gods and 12 gods, and there's always 3 in there, a Trinity. And the Trinity is always like Venus and Mars and Saturn, or it seems like that's what it is. And so in the book of Job, it talks about Job having 7 sons. Well, we know that that's a reference to the 7 planets because that keeps coming up over and over again. The number 7 in the Bible always relates to the planets. The number 12 in the Bible always relates to their positions. Like you have the 12 tribes of Israel. The big deal with them is positioning them. You know, as they go into the Promised Land and they say, okay, tribe of Judah, you go here. This is your position. And then the tribe of Benjamin, you go here. And so that's their positions, the 12 tribes, and then you've got but at the same time, inside of that, you've got these like 7 kings and 7 judges and 7 wise men, 7 advisors, 7 eunuchs. That's always showing up within that 12, and that has something to do with the position of the 7 planets inside of the ecliptic, because the ecliptic is always throughout history. Every culture seems to figure that they need to divide it into 12, and that relates back to the 12 months of the year when the ecliptic was, you know, dependable marker for the position of the moon. But the how many moons we had, the only reason I think we had 3 moons is not so much that, like, there's ancient inscriptions and things that don't really say anything. It'll just like be a picture of a king, and in the background you'll see 3 planets with no explanations, no hieroglyphs and no cuneiform, and you know, no phonetic writing. But it just seems like that comes up over and over again, that there's these 3 that somehow are important. Well, Job had 7 sons, but he also had 3 daughters. Now, there's other stories in the Bible that speak of 7, but they don't speak of 3, which makes me think that the 7 planets and 3 moons did not disappear simultaneously, that something was going on during that time where you ended up losing your moons first, and then then the planets went out in a second event. But in other cultures, Venus always ends up sounding like one of our moons, which is confusing because Venus is one of the 7. So I really don't know. But I do know that there's just too many stories about those 3 planets, and those 3 planets are associated with moons. Now, if you go back to the earliest books of the Bible, when the daughters of the sons of man had sexual relations with the gods, those gods always end up being associated with the number 7, and the daughters of the sons of man isn't associated with any number until you get to the book of Job. But in the book of Esther, you have the story of Venus, which is called, in the book of Esther, is called Vashti. You know, Vashti, it's a Persian word. The Persian word Vashti means mother goddess, while at the same time meaning sexually arousing woman. So that's what Vashti means. That's what Venus means. Venus, in the language that worship the goddess Venus, that means mother goddess, but it also means sexually arousing woman. And so this Venus, goddess Venus, which, like I say, occurs down in South America, Central America, China, all around the Promised Land, the goddess Venus is said to be like an adulteress. She goes from Mars to Saturn to Jupiter, all these planets, or these gods, which we associate with the planets. And there are stories in the ancient past of Venus being like the moon of one planet, and then in another story, she's the moon of another planet, and then she's cast out, which is, I think, that's going to relate to the book of Revelation, when, you know, like this thing with Virgo recently. That's not the sign. The sign is, when it says in the Bible that the woman returns, that's not constellation Virgo. That's Venus returning to its proper orbit, which is, who knows? It'd have to be something really close, whether it's circling the Earth or whether it's, its orbital path just becomes so close that it seems to be circling the Earth, or it at least seems to be in very close proximity to the Earth. I don't know. A lot of this stuff I don't know. I'm not a preacher. You know, preacher will get up there and tell you exactly, you know, how much change Jesus has in his pocket. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, you know, I tell you what's in the Bible and what's recorded outside of the Bible, and kind of lead you to see that there is a connection. But, you know, it's like the Nibiru stuff. I'm not going to tell you what day that's going to happen.
Just a couple quick hellos, and then there's a couple comments about the moons. Angela Forrester says, hello, everyone. Mishu says, hi, y'all. And Servicing IQ says, online. Let's see. Caesar Olive says he can see the moon right now in Texas, and it's a beautiful day at 6:15 p.m. Next comes from Servicing IQ. He says, Venus, Earth, and Sirius, the traveler. End of the line. We are from Venus, end of the line.
I'll tell you what, I don't think we're from Venus, but I can tell you what secular history records. And this is kind of odd, and you can take it for what it's worth. Every time I make a video where I talk about this stuff, somebody posts information from what's called the Electric Universe. There's a YouTube channel, and I think it's called Electric Universe, or either they make videos called the Electric Universe. But in that, they talk about, like, there are cultures around our Earth that really, really worship Venus, and Venus always has wings. You know, it's like the Mother God, or Mary, or the Catholic Mary, or like the ancient Egyptian Isis. She's always shown with wings, or with, like in India, she's shown with a bunch of arms. You know, is it Kali? Isn't that what she's called in India? But anyways, they all look the same. And Venus, in art, the planet Venus is always depicted like a comet. You know, we're talking about how it would go from planet to planet to planet. Well, I saw that on that Electric Universe channel, that they were showing all of these depictions of Venus from all around the world. And Venus was always depicted with this thing that looked like a comet, like one of those birdies that you use when you're playing badminton. That's what it looked like. And they were saying that in some cultures that was associated with flies, and they don't think that it's because of the shape of Venus would make it look like a fly, but because when Venus passed near Earth, around the world, people had these plagues of flies. And it happened, now this is just speculation, and I know that in the Bible it says that there were plagues of flies on Egypt, but these Electric Universe people claim that if you look at the Bible and you try to figure out when all these things happened, all of the stories about fly infestations around the world were associated with a near miss by planet Venus. And so that all took place about the same time that the Israelites left Egypt. Coincidence? I don't think so. But at the same time, I'm going to take the fifth. I won't say that happened, but I think it probably had something to do with it. So the whole story being that as Venus was passing by, perhaps it came close enough that species that lived on Venus were able to somehow cross over into our environment. Now I'm sounding, is that crazy talk? I don't want to talk like I'm crazy. I mean, that's just something that I've heard, and so if it's true, it's true, but we'll find out after the resurrection, won't we?
Hangman John Ruth says the one he thinks you were thinking about, the Indian religion, was Shiva, I believe, god of destruction, and he says that Shiva and CERN seem to be cohorting these days.
Yeah,
so
well,
that was a statue out in front of CERN, I guess.
As above, so below.
Maria's Vegetable Garden says, I'm here. And next question comes from Angel Forster. What's your take on the shorelines being pulled out, like they say, from Hurricane Irma? Never seen that before during hurricanes.
I don't have TV, so I don't know what people do. You know, I get every now and then a subscriber will send me some article about something like that, and I'll check into it, but I haven't received anything, so I don't know. I've been through some hurricanes.
Next comes from Uncle Nesta. He says he's sad about the opioid epidemic. He's lost 3 friends in the last month. says he hates addiction. God bless. And then Angel Forster says she's dealing with that with someone. And then Uncle Nesta says he'll pray for them. And what's your thoughts on opioid addiction, I guess?
Is that what it is? Well, you know, opioid isn't just something you get on the streets. You know, you can get that at the VA if your story is convincing enough and the doctor's your friend. But I mean, that's opioids. That's like that stuff that they give you for pain when you're in a combat situation or something, right?
Yeah, heroin and things like that, morphine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. This is if you look at everything that people get addicted to, and people get addicted to some stupid stuff, you know. I mean, for those that aren't addicted, to a person that likes opium, they're like, what's wrong with that? But for somebody that doesn't use opium, you know, we're watching these people kind of deteriorate, because they do, people that are addicted to stuff. It seems stupid, but everything, you know, shopping for shoes, all of that. I mean, if you're in a world where people love one another, and every food that you could possibly imagine, you know, everything that you're supposed to eat was right there hanging in the trees, and you weren't working, you're hanging out with your friends all the time, you wouldn't be addicted to, you know, you wouldn't want to take something to make you forget that. You know, I think people, they don't like their lives, and so they have to try to find something they do like.
I agree. Kitch Cool says hi, and Darren's Mail ×2 says hello to Ali Toledo and Sustenance.
You know, one of the things I need to bring up is Kitchicool sent me 3 transcripts from 3 videos I made in the past. He's starting to like listen to the videos and write everything down or type everything, and he's sending me the transcripts. And all I have to do is kind of make it the way I want it, like put the punctuation. You know, if you go on the site and you see the stuff that I've got that's written there, it's like I'll go through that with a fine-tooth comb, and then I'll send it to 2 or 3 friends and let them go through it. But anyways, the one I'm working on now is called the 77s. So if you saw the video, the 77s, and you wish that you had a transcript of that, that may be up tomorrow, because I spent on and off as I was coming in and out of the house today. I was probably spent a couple of hours just going through and checking. I'm about halfway through, so maybe I'll finish it tomorrow, and you can see that up. Plus, I did go ahead and post another chapter from the book that we haven't read here, if you want to read that chapter of the book.
Next, BMW guy says, sorry I'm late, but the next question comes from Synoptic Problem. He's asking about Matthew 24. Given that the disciples are in the dark regarding Jesus's crucifixion, upcoming crucifixion and resurrection, how could they have any insight to ask him about a second coming? This surely seems to me to be a later creation concern of the early church and anachronistically placed on the lips of the disciples. What do you think?
Yeah, if you go back and look, I mean, here's the deal. It's like there was a time period, and I don't know when it wasn't recently, but like 1700s, 1600s or something, where people were starting to question things in the Bible, and they came up with some pretty good storylines, like, okay, this doesn't belong because, you know, this is outside of Jesus's normal way of talking, and this style of this writer, you know, this is supposed to be John book 1, and it doesn't match John. By the way, that's what synoptic problem means. Synoptic is like the synoptic gospels, I think, are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And John isn't. If you look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they're all identical. You look at John, it's not. It's different. But here's the thing. It's like every day, and I mean, I'm oversimplifying this because I don't think they've ever found 2 copies of the Bible that were identical, and which is a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing, because if you see that once you realize that every copy of the Bible that's ever been found is a little bit different from every other copy, you start to question whether or not it's really God's Word. But it's kind of a way of confirming that this stuff is right, because, you know, we all talk different. And, you know, if we lived in a world where we had to handwrite everything, then a lot of what we would normally, or the ways we would normally talk, would show up on our papers. And so we can look at that, and you see all of these things where every single idea is preserved from transcript to transcript to transcript. So we're finding all these old ancient texts. And what he's talking about, Matthew chapter 24, that's like a really, really big part of the Bible. And every time they find like a book of Matthew or anything related to, I mean, they're finding little chunks. Like sometimes they'll open up a jar and there'll be a piece of paper like that big with 2 or 3 words on it. And so they're finding these things everywhere, and they've never ever dug up a copy of the book of Matthew without chapter 24 in it or with a different version of chapter 24. So it's really, you know, if you say that that's wrong, you'd have to go to the next step and say, well, Matthew is a fiction. You know, it wasn't ever written. And there are people that say that. There are people that say that Matthew was a tax collector and he was a Jew, and so he originally wrote Matthew in the book of Matthew in Hebrew. I've been hearing that argument since I was like 12. And so I had in my head that there were some existing copies of the book of Matthew in Hebrew. And so maybe 5, 6 years ago, some Messianic Christians or Jews said something about the book of Matthew originally being in Hebrew. And I thought, well, you know, that's an important thing that I really should know for myself. And so I went from article to article to article talking about how Matthew was originally written in Hebrew and never found any evidence whatsoever that that's the case. And I'm not saying that they haven't found any existing copies of the book of Matthew in Hebrew. I'm telling you, they found probably a bunch of books of Matthew or bits and pieces of Matthew, and they're all in Greek, and they've never found even so much as one piece in Hebrew. I think there's like somebody has a Hebrew version of Matthew that was written in like 1200 AD, so that doesn't count. But not only that, but a lot of the reason they speculate on that is because the way the Greek words are arranged kind of reminds scholars of the way it would have been laid out in Hebrew if it had been written in Hebrew. But I've looked at that and I don't see a thing, not a single shred of evidence to support that, or even like this idea here that Matthew 24 is out of sync with the Bible. And there are too many other things that match. There are certain things in there that maybe like one sentence is added, but you know, even that, it's like it's not something that would alter the text. You know, like one of the things he says in there that I've heard being questioned before is this good news of the kingdom will be preached throughout the entire world, and then the end will come. It's like part of that doesn't belong. Or where he says, go therefore and baptize in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Like people that don't like the Trinity say that doesn't belong there, but it probably does. I don't know why anybody would question that. It's not like he's saying that Jesus is God or anything.
Our next question comes from Hangman John Ruth. I don't believe in the rapture doctrine. I can't find any scripture that would back it up. What are your thoughts?
Now, it's not, there's nothing scriptural about it, but I mean, it's not, doesn't mean it isn't going to happen, because a lot of this stuff that people believe, if you look at like reincarnation, it's like, I don't know where they get that. It's not in the Bible, but there are things in the Bible that suggest that, you know, maybe a reason that people would believe in reincarnation. And there's things in the Bible that would suggest a reason why somebody might believe in the rapture, but the rapture isn't a scriptural thing. But and then again, it may be a loving thing on the part of our Father. You know, these people have to be destroyed. People who are involved in religion. You know, I'm going to make a generalization here, which I don't like to make, but I've been noticing it's like a lot of these messianics are like patriots, and they really they are gods themselves. They want to enforce their will on people through the political process or through some kind of armed uprising or something, and so these people cannot be allowed to live in God's paradise. But if you look at all the videos I make about the separating of the sheep and the goats, and about how there's probably a twin planet to Earth on the other side of the sun, well, you know, these people, if they start floating up into space because God is getting rid of them, you know, it'd be like a comfort to go, oh, I'm being raptured. But it's basically God cleansing the earth to get rid of religious people. So they'll be put into a beautiful paradise somewhere else where they can't do any harm. And then it says 1,000 years later, Satan and his worshipers, which would be these rapturites, will return. You know, so at 1,000 years, apparently we'll see them again somehow. So But no, the rapture, this thing of people being taken off of the earth, that's all. If you look at the scriptures, they've got maybe 100 scriptures to support that. 98 of them are just really, really pushing it. Like no, absolutely no support whatsoever. The three that they have, like it's 1 Thessalonians, I think, or 2 Thessalonians, where it says that we shall be changed in the twinkling of the eye, and we'll go up into the clouds to be with Jesus. That's a really seriously poorly translated verse. You know, in original Greek, it just says we entered the cloud with Jesus, just like the Israelites entered the cloud when they went through the Red Sea, just like the cloud that was in the temple when they did their sacrifice, just like when when Peter and James and John went into the cloud, and there was Jesus with Elijah and Moses. You know, it's always a cloud. That word cloud does not mean up in the sky. It means a cloud, you know, like fog. They went into a fog with, you know, when it says that when Jesus returns at the end, it says he returns, we will go into the cloud to meet Jesus with the resurrected dead. You know, the resurrected dead aren't going to be floating up in the sky.
Let's see. Synoptic Problem says, thanks for trying to answer the question. And Hangman John Ruth says, great answer. That's what he thinks about the rapture. It's not believers. Thank you.
Yeah,
did you mean...
That's like a smart aleck. I mean, for me to say that, it's more like, yeah, we got to have a rapture to get rid of these bad people. But, you know, I mean, it's just logic. You know, the Bible says they got to be gotten rid of. You know, is he going to set them on fire, or, you know, just do something else with them? He's not mean. God isn't mean. He's got to fix things. He promises to fix things. You know.
Marshmallow asks about your comment about the clouds. Could the clouds mean confusion?
No, it's the same. The word is like it. I can't remember what the word is for clouds, but it gets used in other places to speak of us. Like it's not really. It's never used for smoke. It's because that was one of the things when I saw that it was used for describing the temple. It was like, oh well, maybe that's the smoke from burning the sacrifices, but no, it isn't. It's always associated with moisture, the cloud, and it may have something to do with the restoration of the. But it's. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's in the Bible is a really actual physical thing you can touch, but it represents things that are not physical. So yeah, it could be associated with confusion, but the word is used not just for magical stuff. It is used for fog or for rain clouds. It's the same word, but it's like it says we shall go up into the air. That's one of the words it says. Well, the word air that we have for air is A-I-R. The word that's actually used there in Greek is A-E-R, air. And that air is like a division between solid and gas. So when they come up into the air, what it means is they're coming out of the ground. You know, the dead shall come up into the air. It just means they're going to be coming out of the earth. You know, it's not like flying through the air. You know, a person who's buried, you know, you dig them up, they're in the air.
Well, we're running low on questions right now, so
maybe you and I should just talk like we always do.
Yeah, well, Simple Sister Living, she wants to hear a little bit more about the end times timeline, and I think you were pretty clear that it's between 1960 and 2060, so sometime in the next 40 years, but I have a feeling what she's saying is that she wants some sort of words of encouragement. Tell us what life's about. Why is life so difficult? Are things tough for you? I think that's kind of the general vibe, is people want some sort of encouragement about the end times and their difficult life. This is
sounding a lot like an Ala Toledo question.
No. I swear she came down with it. I'm just adding to it.
Because I guess people don't supposed to know you and I talk in private sometime when we're not on TV. But
and I can empathize with her. So.
Yeah. It's like all of us. You know, I'm kind of. I mean, I don't want to be selfish, but gee whiz, I am so sick. I hate every day waking up feeling like I'm going to die, and not being able to do anything. You know, I just had to. I mean, I had to give up knitting nets because of my arthritis, and I had to give up my guitar because of arthritis, and And that's a small problem, you know, because a physical pain is nothing compared to emotional pain. You know, I was over talking to my mom the other day, and you know, she's 76, and she was voicing some of her concerns about being 76 and what's about to happen to her. And I'm like, you know, don't ever tell your kids this kind of stuff when you're 76 years old. Just tell them, I'm happy, I'm going to die soon and see Jesus or something, because it really upset me. I tried not to let it show, but you know, you live in this world where it's like, okay, what can I do tomorrow? Oh, that's right, I can go to the factory and stand there for 12 hours operating a screw gun or something. It's like, gee, how in the world do people tolerate that? You know, I did it for years and years and years, and I don't know how I got through it. But, I mean, my experience with it when I was out in the world and trying to make a living was an absolute nightmare, like an unsurvivable nightmare. I can't even imagine somebody still being stuck in that, and I don't know how I got through it. You know, I have nightmares like every day through the equinox, anyways. Like from September, beginning of September to the end of October, I'm having nightmares constantly for whatever reason. And I had one the other day, and it was just out of the blue. When I was in the Navy, there was like a little port, and I don't even remember what it was. It seemed like there was like a forward room with maybe a big winch in there. I'm not sure. I don't even know why I would go in there, but I went in there a couple of times for some reason. I got sent there, and this port was off one day, and you could see the chain of the ship, you know, the anchor chain in there, and those links are humongous. And I think somebody told me they're like almost 500 pounds a piece per link, and there's thousands and thousands of those things. And occasionally, when you're pulling into port and they drop the anchor, I would be in the very end of the ship, the back end of the ship, and the whole ship would be doing this, and you could feel that chain falling, and you could feel it going up, and it just gave me nightmares to know that port was open where a person could go in there just messing around, and that thing come on and drop just millions of tons of this. Okay, I just went off on another tangent, but I mean, this to have to live with that. There are people that every day go to work in shipyards, and they're on scaffolding that's like a mile high, handling big heavy things, and you know, welding and putting rivets and stuff and all. What a nightmare. And it's just absolutely back-breaking work, and there's no rest from it.
Yeah, that is expensive chain. I've heard about ships being, you know, going after that. It's like somebody loses it, it's worth a lot.
Oh yeah, well, you know, oh yeah, there's videos on online where the chain's going out of control, and you see smoke starting to pour off of that big. It's like just like a big bearing, and it'll be going really fast, and smoke's going off of it, and then bloof, there goes the chain. You know, it's more money than 1,000 people could make in their lifetime for that stupid chain. And I think the reason I even had that nightmare, my wife turned on that movie Titanic the other day, and I've never watched it. I can't make myself watch that because I don't like the ocean. I don't like ships, and I did 6 years. I was on a ship in the ocean, and somehow I just had to every day turn off that fear. You know.
Isn't it amazing though that they have $1 million to buy an anchor chain, but here we are scratching pennies together?
Yeah, I know. It's like somebody sent me something the other day about what an idiot I am, because it said if you took all of the wealth that belonged to the top 10% and you gave it to everybody, that would only be $7,000 per person. How much are you going to do with that? And I'm like, no, that don't sound right. I mean, just an anchor chain would give $7,000 to every person on this planet. See, you know, I mean, that's an exaggeration. But they go out and they spend money. They don't spend it like water, and they don't spend it like air. They spend it like it's a vacuum, like it's not even a real existing thing, on junk that, you know, you could basically walk from here to Europe on chunks of ships.
Dale Rockwell says, never work at a factory, work for yourself. It's as close to freedom as you can get.
Yeah, it's as close to starving to death as you can get to. I mean, that's my experience. I worked for myself. I worked a bunch of jobs before I realized I was never going to make anything, and I was always going to be miserable, and I was always going to be in pain, and I was always going to be belittled for not being able to do as much as they wanted me to do. And so I went to work for myself, and I worked all the time. You know, I'm talking like 70 hours a week, because I just absolutely had to work that much just to make enough to live. And my experience with it was that I'm a good person. People see me coming and they automatically think, let's abuse this guy. So I had a lot of clients that never paid me, a lot of clients that they always change the rules. Anybody you work for is going to change, even if you're just mowing lawns. I've got a couple of subscribers that mow lawns, and they're like, they'll spend a week doing yard work for one person, and at the end of the week, that person just won't talk to them, won't pay them. Happens all the time.
Well, Great Bay says, the meek shall inherit the earth. Money is the root of all sin.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, here's the thing is, civilization is a pyramid scheme. And the only reason it exists is because you can see that top of that pyramid. You know, you're down here, it looks like you're going to be here forever, but there's always a potential that you could be up there. Of course, that's a fiction. But the way you get up there is through certification. So you're down at the bottom, you're cleaning the bilge, you're sweeping the deck or whatever, and then you get to be a petty officer in the military, or you get to be the boss at Walmart. And there's always that hope of getting up there, but those guys that are up there are chosen at birth. You're not going to get there. And when I'm pointing at the pyramid, the top of the pyramid, I'm talking about like the top 90% of the pyramid. If you're a decent human being and you live on this earth, you're never going to get there. You can chase money, you can do whatever. Money really is the root of all evil, because money is like the scorekeeper. You know, that's how you keep score. Baseball, there's a board that tells you which teams have how many points. The dollar bill tells you how many points you got. And I think that's why people care about things like, what is that called, credit score? It's like, okay, I can't get money, but I could get dream money. You know, credit score is like dream money, so that you can add that to my scorecard, because I can't get real money. But it's terrible. You know, in the Bible, when it talks about the streets being paved with gold, you know, the churches always present that as a good thing. But I think it's about the streets are paved with gold because people realize gold has no value, so they're throwing it out and walking on it.
Caesar Olive says he got a Forbes magazine a few years ago, and
I subscribe.
Yeah, right. He says he calculated the 100 billionaires' wealth in the world and divided it by 7 billion people, and he calculated it out to be about $5 million each or something.
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. It's like it's not magic, because magic always has a potential for working. This stuff is just total bizarre fiction. It's just insane. You know, you think about all the junk, the infrastructure of society. A lot of that junk belongs to somebody. You know, I mean, even the military belongs to somebody.
Next question comes from Uncle Nesta. He's asking about the Catholic Church. Do you think the Catholic Church is cursed?
You know, it's like there's a lot of religions that get a bad rep, and they probably deserve it, but that's like part of that hierarchy. You know, all of these churches down here that seem kind of like they're not that bad. They want to be up there. You know, they're looking at that ring on the Pope's hand, and they're like, I got to get me a ring like that. So it's like saying the United States is the worst government on the planet. We're only the worst because we have the most weapons. If you gave all of our weapons to, like, Chile would be the worst nation on the planet, because they're like, hey, we can force everybody to do what we want now. And it's the same thing with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is, it's at the top. It ain't really at the top. I think the Jewish faith is at the top because they were smart enough to sneak in some agents into every government on earth is run by citizens of Israel. Wait a second, shouldn't the government of Israel be run by citizens of Israel? I'm not getting this stuff about England. You know, how do you get to be president of England if you're from Israel? I mean, this guy doesn't even go to. Most of the people that are running the American government live in Israel. You know, if you want a job at the Bay Minette Fire Department, they want you to live in Bay Minette. It's like if you were to open a fire department for my hometown and everybody that worked there lived in Israel. I mean, they make these guys get their voter registration from the area where they work.
Going back to the comment about, dividing up the money into the world and the 7 billion people on the earth, Simple Sister Living says, I doubt there are 7 billion people. Population statistics are inflated and lies.
Who knows? It's like I'm starting to turn into a lawyer. You know what I mean? It's like when I start a video, it's like I feel like I have to spend the first 15 minutes explaining. I do not believe in the religion of the Catholic Church, but I will be quoting some Catholic teachings in this video. And I do not believe in the religion of science, but I will be quoting. Same thing with the population of the earth. Who counts this? Oh, well, those people, they come by and they write all that information down. Like, I ain't buying into that. Now, we could weigh the planet and tell all the people to get off and then weigh it again and divide up the amount of weight that's, I don't know. I don't know how you could figure that junk out. And, a lot of the countries, they may have it close. Who knows?
Next question comes from Synoptic Problem. He says, ancient historians and biographers, often writing many years later, would take the liberty to write what they thought the person would have said or did. Did the gospel writers add to or change the gospels at all?
If you look watch my videos about the things that we talk about. We're talking about the movement of the planets and the movement of the stars and the amount of time in a day and the amount of hours in a day and the amount of days in a year and the amount of years in a solstice cycle. Those are things that human beings couldn't have figured out until fairly recently. The solstice cycle, that's probably less than 100 years human beings have figured that out. And if the world were to go back into conjunction, you would have 144,000 days in a 400-year solstice cycle. That means that every day at noon, the sun would be over a different spot. So that here's the Earth, it's a globe, and it's spinning, and it's tilting, and it's spinning, and it's tilting. And if you were to track the path of the sun across the globe, every day, every 24 hours, the sun would, or not 24 hours, but however long it would take for it to, for that cycle, you would, at the end of a solstice cycle, you would have 144,000 individual dots on the planet, and that's because on day 144,001, the sun would be directly over the very first spot it started on. And there's no human that could, human beings did not know that, and they still don't know it. I mean, they know there's a 400-year cycle, but the actual science behind that wasn't actually known until less than 100 years ago. And the weird thing is that when the Gregorian calendar was created, it was created by Pope Gregory, and he based it on a 400-year cycle. And there's no way that he could have known that the Earth had a 400-year cycle. In other words, according to the Gregorian calendar, it's like if it's Thursday, January the 3rd, and the next day is going to be Friday, January the 4th, and you're going to have an identical year so that every single day is exactly the same as it was before, you would have to go back 400 years to find that point in time, because the Gregorian calendar is a 400-year cycle. Now, is it possible that the apostles or somebody else altered the Bible to, maybe they did, but Pope Gregory altered it, and he still, even as a demon-possessed man, and I think that Pope Gregory, getting back to whether or not the Catholics are most evil in the world or something, Pope Gregory I represented the Roman Empire, he represented the final piece of the Roman Empire before it became the British Empire, became Satan's domain under King James I, the guy that translated the Bible. You just physically, you would have to you'd have to ignore a whole lot of insane, incredible, provable stuff that has happened in ancient history that the Bible records in one way or another. You know, it's like they can't, the guys that wrote the Bible could not know the stuff that's in the Bible. But the same could be said of a lot of other cultures. You know, are any of the books absolutely perfect, the perfect Word of God? I don't think so, but I think God had in his head what he wants to be in there, and all that stuff is in there.
Let's see, a couple users kind of asked the same question. First, Marshmallow says, I've seen lots of hate in the comments sections of other people's posts. The emotional pain that I feel from that is unbearable sometimes. They mention how they can't wait to kill Whitey or Cracker. And then Hangman John Roos says, what do you think on men's hearts are failing them? With everyone in turmoil all over the planet, it seems like life got cheap all at once. I see the confusion of Babylon all over. It's hard to put into words. They both seem to kind of echo the same comment.
I think, you know, I get the brunt of this stuff. You know, I don't know if she's talking about the comments right now, on the live stream, because I never see those.
No. In my regular
videos, yeah, there's a lot of hate, but you know, people who are dedicated to civilization are going to get their feelings hurt if they come to my channel. That's just par for the course. It's the way it works. But at the same time, it's good. It means you know what God, it says in the Bible, lift your heads erect, knowing your deliverance is near. And I don't even know if that applies to the time period we're living in, but I do know that all humans are designed to want truth and love truth. And you know, you'll see this. Don't think I'm arrogant. If you read the comments, you're going to see me like acting like a Bible character sometimes. You know, people will come to me and, like, I guess tonight, right before I turned this on, somebody said something about lightning. I made that video about September 23rd, and I said, well, in the Bible it says, just as lightning goes from east to west, so the Son of Man will be. And I said in there, lightning doesn't go east to west. Lightning can go anywhere. You know, it's not unidirectional. It can come down and hit the ground. Sometimes things go up from the ground. So it's not, you know, that is not a defining characteristic of lightning. For lightning to go east to west is not what it's known for. And not only that, but the word for lightning in there in the original Greek means celestial object. So it's talking about celestial objects go from east to west. Well, if you go back and look at that September 23rd video, it's pure truth. And it was supposed to be a mundane topic, just me saying I'm not involved with that. But I revealed a lot of sacred secrets in there that just our little group knows, right? This is some special information that no church anywhere on earth is going to share with you. And I feel like if you fall into this channel and you don't get down on your knees and tears and thank God for it, there's something wrong with you. But to sit there and nitpick over such stupid stuff, it just blows my mind. It's like, how can you stumble upon this? And I'll even say that. I said, okay, I don't know how you did this. Don't even care. But somehow you've stumbled on the only source of reliable spiritual information on earth. And you're critiquing the way that I said something? I mean, is that all you got out of this? So there are two different kinds of people. If you want to divide people up, you know, I'm not one of these guys that say everybody on the other side of the American border is evil, or everybody that's black is evil, or everybody that's rich is evil. But there really is people who are seeking truth are good. We're here. This is where we're going to be. And people who are looking for a fight are not the same kind of people. Yeah, it bothers me, but it doesn't bother me that much. It's just you know it's coming. Nothing you can do about it.
Don Jones asks, how many people actually read their Bible today?
Well, let me count. I'm sorry. I had to do that, man. I don't know. You know, here's the thing. It's like I've had people shock me before. I've gone, like back when I was a Jehovah's Witness, you know, I'd walk up, and I don't know if these people could see me coming from a mile away, but they'll say, "Here, come on in," and there's the whole family sitting around with a Bible in their hand. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? I ain't never seen nobody read the Bible before. I mean, I read the Bible, but even when I was going to the Kingdom Hall, you know, I thought we're the only religion on earth that reads the Bible, and I knew when I was going there that, you know, I would even ask people, you know, how many times you read the Bible? Well, I've never actually read it, but I'm sure I've heard every word of the Bible coming here to the Kingdom Hall and listening to this same 100 verses over and over again. It's like, well, you know, there's 35,000 other verses. you may be interested in seeing what those have to say. And so there's got to be somebody out there. You know, I mean, I've read it 8 times, and I was like a quarter of the way through it 9 times, and I kind of just got so busy with, you know, jumping from book to book and all. I probably will never read it again, you know, cover to cover.
Last question, and then you can take us out, is Food and Water Music asks, when all people on earth are wise and follow natural law, is it supposed to actually remain that way forever?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it was me and Marshmallow today. She sent me a message, and I wrote her back as about permaculture. And I said, you know, it's just so weird. Just this little simple fact, like you've got, everybody knows it's an orange tree produces oranges. It's not like magic. But if every human on earth, just say every human on earth were to plant one fruit tree today, that ends world hunger forever. Like overnight. Overnight! You know, a simple little thing like that. And it's nothing but humans going back to natural law, you know, because unnatural law is you kill everything and cut everything down, and then you go to the store and complain about the price of food. So, yeah, once people go back to natural law, well, there's two groups of people that are listed in the Bible. One is those who have the first resurrection, and they live forever. It says those people have no worries about ever dying again at all. But those who participate in the second resurrection, they could receive what's called the second death. So I suspect that once the earth is fixed, it's fixed. You know, I can't imagine somebody. I mean, I'm a good person because I was born a good person. I didn't like have to work at it or anything. It's just I can't hurt people. I don't want to hurt nobody. I'm not greedy. And other people that are just bad, they just seem to be bad. So if you put all of the bad people somewhere else, they may have to struggle with getting a grip on doing things right. But I think the kind of people that will be first resurrection, into paradise earth, you know, why would you want to throw a monkey, you know, wrench into the works? Just, hey, I just want to be there. I'll find out when we get there. Because I really, you know, I got all these fantasies. I think about this all the time. And I guess if I was with a small group of very close friends, you know, I'd want to hear all their ideas and I'd want to share my ideas. But I feel kind of uncomfortable anytime I go outside of what the Bible says. Oh, well, hey, it was a wonderful live stream, and I enjoyed it very much. I hope everybody out there enjoyed it very much. And in fact, I was really starting to feel like it's, I don't know how many of these we've done, but this is starting to feel like a family, because every time Ala Toledo comes on and says hello, hello, it's always the same people. That's what a family is. And so I hope everybody out there feels like this is a family. And I hope everybody realizes that the people that are here, that are involved in this, are the people that we're going to spend eternity with. This is like a core group of something that's going to get a lot bigger, I can promise you. And I hope you come back next week. We'll be reading the next chapter in the book. And as always, if you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.